Good afternoon to you. 407 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Amber Smith will be with us, Army helicopter pilot, former senior Pentagon official. We'll talk about the latest off of in the wake of this collision between a military helicopter, American Airlines flight just off of Reagan National last night. And then Hung Cao will join us at 5 o'clock. That retired Navy captain has he's salvaged many aircraft crashes in the past. We'll talk about what that experience must be like now as these guys are undertaking this recovery effort, and also get into Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing today to become the next director of national intelligence. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The President of the United States, President Trump, just moments ago, welcoming cameras into the Oval Office for, I don't know how many times he's done this now, a lot. I can't even keep track anymore. Signing executive orders, including at least one related to last night's crash. Let's listen in to the president in the Oval Office just moments ago.
If we could, I'd ask Will to explain the first, but really more importantly, explain the second, and we'll start signing. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. Just 2 items for your signature today. The first is the formal commission appointing Chris Rochelot to be the Deputy Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration.
Right.
And since the commissioner position since the administrator position is currently vacant, he will act as the administrator since he's now been appointed deputy.
And he's a very capable guy.
Extremely experienced in aviation and highly regarded in the industry and in government.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Second, for your signature, we have a presidential memorandum titled Immediate Assessment of Aviation Safety. In light of the damage done to aviation safety by the Biden administration's DEI and woke policies, what this presidential memorandum orders is for your Secretary of Transportation and FAA Administrator, in this case acting FAA Administrator, to basically ensure that we are actively undoing all of that damage, that we are assessing how much damage was done, and that we're ensuring that people hired within the FAA, in keeping with your memorandum of January 21st, are only the most outstanding, capable people for the jobs that they're being hired into.
In other words, competence.
Yes, sir. Elevating competence over everything else instead of the DEI policies that were pursued by the Biden administration.
I think everyone understands that.
Return to this audio in just a moment. I do want to share with you that the New York Times has just broken a report that the staffing at Reagan National's air traffic control tower last night was, quote, not normal. Not normal, the New York Times reports. That's according to a preliminary report out of the FAA this afternoon. Staffing at the air traffic control tower at Ronald Reagan National Airport was, quote, not normal for the time of day and volume of traffic, end quote, according to an internal preliminary FAA safety report about the collision that was reviewed by the New York Times. The controller who was handling helicopters in the airport's vicinity Wednesday night was also instructing planes that were landing and departing from its runways. Those two jobs typically are assigned to two different controllers rather than one. So apparently an unusual setup last night for the air traffic controllers. President Trump just signing an executive order related to the staffing and and basically how air traffic control is done by the FAA.
And Obama.
Yes.
Both of them. Okay, but Biden much worse. Not even a contest. What they've done is just crazy in so many other ways. Okay?
Mr. President, to be clear, are you saying race or gender played a role in this tragedy?
It may have. I don't know. Incompetence might have played a role. We'll let you know that. But we want the most competent people. We don't care what race they are. We want the most competent people, especially in those positions. And, you're talking about extremely complex things. And if they don't have a great brain, a great power of the brain, they're not going to be very good at what they do, and bad things will happen.
Mr. President, there's long been concerns about the amount of congestion out of D.C. Airport. Do you think that there's too many flights coming out of that airport?
No, I think we need very smart people running the flights and doing it. You know, the ones that aren't good, when they'll either do one of two things. They'll have too many coming in and they can't handle it, or they'll have the people waiting up in the air, which everyone's been caught in that situation, and circling the airports for an hour, and that's no good either.
Mr. President, are you aware?
Military helicopter training flights that are flying around National Airport all the time, what's your view? Should they be rolled back?
It's fine if they're in the right locations and if they're not at the same levels. I mean, if a plane coming in is at 300 feet or 400 feet and a helicopter's training at 300 or 400 feet, why wouldn't they be up 500 feet higher? So
Interesting, by the way. This stands out to me as interesting. I don't know if the president is tipping his hand as to knowing specifically the altitude of that helicopter at the moment of the collision, 300 or 400 feet. That may give us some indication of how this all went down. Again, those helicopters, their maximum altitude at that area is supposed to be 200 feet.
And that, to a certain extent, is the air traffic controller. Wait, please, wait just a second.
You feel like what happened last night was preventable?
I do, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And obviously, that was something that should not have happened. And we're not going to let it happen again. Yes, please.
Mr. President, on a slightly different subject, on your Canada and Mexico tariffs, will oil be included or excluded from those tariffs?
So we'll be announcing the tariffs on Canada and Mexico for a number of reasons. Number one is the people that have poured into our country so horribly and so much. Number two are the drugs, fentanyl, and everything else that have come into the country. And number three are the massive subsidies that we're giving to Canada and to Mexico in the form of deficits. And I'll be putting the tariff of 25% on Canada and separately 25% on Mexico. And we will really have to do that because we have very big deficits with those countries. Those tariffs may or may not rise with time.
Will oil be part of that, though? Because we get oil from Canada.
Oil is going to have nothing to do with it as far as I'm concerned. Oil has nothing to do with it.
Mr. President,
you said in confidence.
Regarding Guantanamo Bay, you want 30,000 new beds there. Is there a possibility that will increase, or is 30,000 the maximum?
It could increase, yes.
What would be the maximum?
It depends, but countries that won't take back their criminals that they sent into us, they sent them to us. They put them into the caravans.
Yeah,
and
Bill Clinton had 50,000 foreign nationals housed at Guantanamo Bay back in the mid-'90s. President Trump's only talking about 30,000 illegals who are here right now.
They came in, as sure as you're standing there, they were sent by those countries. Then they're going to be met very harshly with sanctions, etc.
And when are you hoping to have Guantanamo Bay, this new facility, up and running?
It'll be up pretty quickly.
How much do you think it's going to cost?
Not very much.
It's not a new facility. It exists.
A lot of the structure is already there, as you know.
Mr. President, you said that incompetence may have played a role. Are you aware of any performance issues or disciplinary actions that were taken against anyone who was working the tower last night or flying the plane?
No, and I hope that's not the case in this case, but certainly over the years it's been the case.
Here's a question. How many near misses have there been that we don't know about? How many near misses of this kind between helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft have there been on that approach to runway 33 at Reagan National Airport? Has the FAA investigated this in the past? What is the answer to that question? How often has this issue come up?
It's the case with respect to close calls, and it's the case with respect to circling for hours on end. Planes circle a lot, and they circle because the people bringing them down, these people that have to be very, very smart, and it's not based on anything other than the brain. We need the smartest people. We need both psychologically smart and just brilliant, period. And we are going to have them in our control towers. We are going to have the most competent people in the country in our control towers, not people that are there for any other reason.
Sir, you said that you envision sending the 80-something thousand IRS agents hired under Biden to the border. What role do you see them playing?
Well, we'll see. I may do that, or I may use different people, but we're going to send more. We're going to give the Border Patrol some help. Although now, if you look, they've taken in the lowest number since my administration. The numbers are very low. And that level, we don't need so much help. People know not to come because if they come, they're not going to make it in and they're going to be shipped out.
Those 80,000 IRS agents could run refreshment tables for the Border Patrol. They could set up, they could have like a bunch of cups of water waiting, that kind of thing.
Mr. President, Egypt's president and the King of Jordan have both said that they won't take in displaced people from Gaza like you suggested. Is there anything you can do to make them do that? I mean, tariffs against those countries, for example?
They will do it. They will do it.
What makes you say that?
They're going to do it. Okay? We do a lot for them, and they're going to do it.
Mr. President, you've offered over 2 million federal workers the option to resign immediately.
Right.
There are 50,000 FAA employees. Does this tragedy give you reason to reconsider that option of resignations because of concerns about staffing issues on airline safety?
If people aren't coming to work, if they're not going to come into the office and report as per the date that you know what it is, everybody knows what the date is, it's been very well documented, then they're going to be terminated.
So you're not concerned though that if many people take that
It's such left-wing thinking to say like, oh, numbers of people equals quality of work. No, it doesn't.
offer, there could be shortages that could lead to
Then
safety
they'll be
issues.
replaced with very competent people. We have a lot of competent people in this country.
Have you spoken to any of the families of the victims of the plane crash?
I don't want to comment on that.
Do you have a plan to go visit the site or meet with any of the
I have a
first
plan
responders?
to visit, not the site, because you tell me what's the site? The water?
Or to meet with the
Want me to go
first
swimming?
responders down there?
I don't have a plan to do that, but I will be meeting with some people that were very badly hurt with their family member, obviously, but I'll be meeting with some of the families, yeah.
On birthright citizenship, sir, do you believe that there are 5 votes on the Supreme Court that would uphold your position?
On what?
5 votes on the Supreme Court.
What
for
position?
Birthright citizenship.
I think so, yeah. Look, birthright citizenship was, if you look back when this was passed and made, that was meant for the children of slaves. This was not meant for the whole world
My
to come
man,
and pile
this
in.
guy is exactly right. And the media just completely blows past this. Here's Trump telling you truth, CNN won't.
To the United States of America, everybody coming in and totally unqualified people with perhaps unqualified children. This wasn't meant for that. This was meant, when it was originally done, for the children of slaves. And that was a very good and noble thing to do, and I'm in favor of that 100%. But it wasn't meant for the entire world to occupy the United States.
Good for
So you don't
him.
see it requiring a constitutional amendment that would be.
I just think that we'll end up winning that court in the Supreme Court. I think we're going to win that case.
Yeah.
And I look forward to winning.
They clearly want to litigate this. They want this to go before the Supreme Court. This is what the Trump administration desires.
This has been going on. We're at that level. We're the only country in the world that does this. There's no other country at this level. There's no other country in the world that does it. It's crazy.
Mr. President, if 64 people lost their lives last night, if you aren't confident that DEI had any role, why bring it up?
Well, all I'm talking about is competence, and we want in that particular position, we have to have the most competent people in our country because we're talking about lives. Now, it may or may not have had to do, but I don't like the fact that the helicopter was at the exact same level as the airplane. The helicopter should have been 1,000 feet or 500 feet above it or something below it.
Below it.
The plane was at 300 to 400 feet. Or the plane should have been stopped because the helicopter could have stopped. The plane can't be stopped, but the plane was on a schedule that was, it was along a track. They call it a track. And it's the same track that every other plane's used for many years. It was going down and landing. And the helicopter got in its way. And if the helicopter was higher or lower or stopped or turning left or turning right at a quicker time, I mean, it turned, but it turned when it was too late. A tragic story. So, I don't know, do you blame it on the air traffic controller too, in addition to the pilots? Maybe the pilot's fault, they should have seen it. I would have thought they should have seen it. Because it was a plane that was loaded up with lights and everybody, you can see it from Kennedy Center, you can see it very easily. So, all I want is the most competent people in our.
We're going to talk about more what this looks like in a moment. Amber Smith is going to join us, Army helicopter pilot. That's the president from the Oval Office. We've got your calls ahead. A lot to get to right now.
Tomorrow on the Chris Plante Show, the deadliest air disaster in the U.S. in 15 years, and immediately, it's all about politics. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
All right, let's go to the phones. Speaking of that crash, let me get Jim from McLean in here on line 1. Jim, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. How you doing? This is Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Hey,
What's on your mind, sir?
Yeah, so test pilot calling in regarding putting myself in the perspective of Pat 25, which is a helicopter coming down from the north.
Yeah.
It was I've looked at the tapes on this. It's with the cockpit stuff going on. I haven't listened to the UHF comm, but I can infer what Pat 25 was saying. I personally think it was pretty clear that he had SA, situational awareness, to the RJ, which is the light regional.
Uh-huh.
And there's a couple of mistakes that happened here. One, Pat 25 committed to the inside over water deconfliction. This RJ is coming on a tight final to runway 33. He's cleared to do that way early south of the Wilson Bridge. He's actually cleared to land.
Right.
But he's got he's established on a path. He's descending from 500 down to 300 feet on a steady course, which is over land away from the airfield.
Yes.
The RJ is drifting right to left inside Pat 25's cockpit. They're seeing a deconflicted path, and then he's directed to go behind the regional jet. Do you have the regional jet? He clearly says he does, and I think he did. There's no way he didn't. He had a landing light on with night vision goggles. That's like having the sun staring at you, right? So there's no way he missed that. Now, it could be confused in all that cultural lighting in the back. It's going to be hard to pick up the drift that's about to take place.
Yes.
But if it's drifting right to left, he has good deconfliction. He's moving off to the right, closer to the airfield. He's confirmed he's deconflicted by tower, saying that you're deconflicting going behind. But what the tower makes a mistake and doesn't tell him you're deconflicted with aircraft on short final runway 33, giving no clue to the RJ that he's being talked about as a deconfliction. He just knows that there's some other regional jet that's
So, Jim, you're using a lot of terminology that makes it just a little hard for me to follow. But let me just make sure I understand, because
sorry, go ahead.
There's a theory among pilots right now that I'm hearing that this helicopter may have been looking at a different aircraft and thinking they were deconflicting with a different aircraft that was landing. And not realizing that the one that was heading towards 33 was right there in their 10 o'clock and was arriving. And the reason they couldn't see it is because they have night vision goggles on, and they can't distinguish between the light sources that are to their left.
No, I don't think that's the case. You're talking about 3130, which is the American Airlines that was behind them by a few miles, and he's higher up in altitude. He clearly is deconflicted at first, and this impact they're deconflicted until the RJ takes that left turn to final about 16 seconds prior to impact. So he's deconflicted, he's descending, and now the RJ turns to a collision course, right, and actually cuts off Pat 25.
And so who do you think's at fault based on this? Your understanding of this?
Well, the root cause of this is that the RJ failed to see and avoid. Right, you need to come in, and you have an aircraft. You don't turn to collide with an aircraft.
The commercial airliner failed to see and avoid.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate your perspective as a pilot. Really helpful as we sort through this. In fact, I'm going to speak to another pilot, a helicopter pilot, in just a moment. Amber Smith joins us, Army helicopter pilot, former senior Pentagon official. She'll give us her take on what these Blackhawks have to deal with as they navigate that corridor. Stay with us. Hey, good afternoon. 4:36 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, 5 o'clock, we speak to retired Navy captain, former U.S. Senate candidate Hung Cao. We'll get his reaction to the crash just outside Reagan National last night, the recovery effort ongoing, and he'll talk to us also about Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing today. A lot to discuss. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. 67 people feared dead in that crash between American Eagles Flight 5342 and an Army Blackhawk helicopter last night, just to the east of Reagan National over the Potomac River. Joining us now to discuss how this might have happened and the risks that come with flying helicopters in that area. Amber Smith is here, an Army helicopter pilot, former senior Pentagon official. Amber, good to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
We're talking a lot about how this could possibly happen, and one of the things that I keep hearing from helicopter pilots like yourself, Amber, is they can see how it could happen, given the way that this plane was approaching and what is typical for that area. Give us your sense. What are the basics here?
Yeah, so I agree with what you have heard from other pilots. I think that when the helicopter crew got the call from Tower to confirm that they had visual confirmation of the aircraft that they were told to avoid, and then they confirmed to Tower that they had eyes on that aircraft. I think that they had eyes on the wrong aircraft and confirmed that they had visual sight of it, thinking it was the right aircraft, and likely never even saw the aircraft that they ended up flying into. And most people are like, how can that happen? They're under night vision goggles, and the sky is lit up, and the commercial airliner has all these lights on it. How could a helicopter not see the plane? And I think the biggest thing here to remember is that there is a lot going on as a helicopter pilot, especially when you're flying in the National Capital Region, which is one of the biggest highly dense aerial traffic areas when it comes to helicopters and these commercial jets sort of operating in the same area.
Yes.
And so it was likely, like, you could miss it. If the aircraft is from above you and it is descending on short final, which it was, if they were not looking directly up above them, which you also, have the rotor systems up above you, they were not thinking there was an aircraft there. So sadly, if they were looking right, the other pilot was looking left. And remember, under night vision goggles, it's like looking out of a straw. So you have a very narrow field of view, like horse blinders are on you.
Yes.
And while they allow you to operate at night, it is still extremely challenging to fly under night vision goggles.
So, so many in our audience, of course, have flown in and out of Reagan National Airport many times. One of the ways you do fly in is along the Potomac River, coming from the Wilson Bridge and then landing right there on, I believe, runway 1. And you come in and you've got, if you're a helicopter in that situation, you're looking down the river, there's not a lot of visual obstruction. There's a night sky. Yes, there's light on both pieces of the shore. But this plane wasn't coming from there. In fact, it had changed because had been told to by the air traffic control tower to come instead from a different direction, coming over land, more from National Harbor area, and flying into runway 33. How much does all of that light on land affect your ability to see anything with those night vision goggles?
Well, it definitely affects it, but not it. The issue here is that there's multiple aerial lights, and so it is very easily, when you do not have much direction, which I've listened to the audio, and to me, it sounds like ATC is just asking him, hey, do you see the traffic? There's no direction. There's no location. He may have said, like, the landing aircraft, but still there's zero confirmation that they're talking about the same aircraft.
Right.
And so I think there's like a serious breakdown in communication. And I know this will all come out in investigations, but it's like, I want to see how long had that ATC air traffic controller, been on shift. And we're hearing all of these reports about how understaffed they are and how they're having to work these long shifts. And but the sad thing in aviation is that there is very little room for error, and communication is absolutely essential for the safety and to mitigate risk in sort of these high risk operations, which is aviation. And so go ahead, sorry.
Sure. No. My next question is, how much information is at the hands of these helicopter pilots inside of the cockpit? In other words, are they able to see what the air traffic around them looks like? Is there a panel that's indicating what planes are nearby or inbound? Or do they have to rely entirely on the air traffic control tower for this?
So the blackhawk that this is flying, they have a national mission up in the National Capital Region. They're based out of Fort Belvoir, just south of DC. And so it depends on what software they had in this aircraft, which is different than the type of technology that you may have on a combat mission in Iraq or Afghanistan. And so I do not know exactly the type of what they had going on in the cockpit, but it is not some sort of, just for a visual for people who are not familiar with aviation. It is not like what you see in Top Gun, where you have your aircraft on the screen and then there's bleeps of other aircraft around you. That's not what it looks like at all. Mm-hmm. If anything, they do have basically anti-collision avoidance alarms, but often with helicopters, they are not effective because of how low helicopters fly. And so they constantly have physical hazards around them. And if you are constantly having an alarm going off,
yes.
It just makes it that much more distracting and can actually be a distraction and a safety hazard. So those types of avoidance actually works better when you're straight and level flight at a specific altitude, not when you are flying low level, which they were extremely low level, with all types of hazards around you.
Okay, one of the elements here is the altitude, and I'm curious about that because my understanding is that these helicopters are supposed to be flying no higher than 200 feet along, in this case, the eastern shore of the Potomac as they fly south. And one would assume that the airplanes that are flying into Reagan National would be coming in at the very lowest, just above them. What do you think happened there? How do those two flight paths end up meeting?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say that 200-foot ceiling is insane to me. I just found that out, and just to give some context for that, when I was in Afghanistan flying under night vision goggles, my hard deck, meaning I could not fly below, was 300 feet. Why was it 300 feet? Because our command did not want us smacking our helicopters or flying directly into a mountain or the ground or whatever hazards are extremely low level. So when I heard that, first of all, that's the policy, that aerial helicopter route is 200 feet ceiling. I mean, they got to look at that because the traffic that has been increased, I'm assuming that's a very old number, flight altitude that has not changed, and they obviously do it for deconfliction purposes, but it is very high risk for those helicopters. I can't believe there hasn't been a bigger incident just with helicopters because of that. When it comes to the crash last night, the airliner was on descent on short final, so it was rapidly losing altitude to try to land. The helicopter, I think, was at, like you said, they are supposed to be at 200 feet. It had bounced up to 350, something like that, when they made contact, when the helicopter crashed into the plane. That can happen with the most minor wind gust, the most minor tap of the cyclic, or the collective, the controls inside the helicopter. A couple 150 jump in altitude in a helicopter is like, it happens to everyone. It's just not, it is nothing. It can happen in the blink of an eye that you jump up altitude that quickly.
So a weather factor may have played a role. I mean, my understanding is that wind was, I could be wrong, but that wind played a role in the decision to even switch the landing last night to runway 33. So presumably wind could have been a factor here.
It absolutely could have, but the issue is that everybody in the aviation world should know this. So why is there such a minimum separation allowed between a aircraft on short final coming down and military helicopters flying below it? And I also think a big problem here, because the ATC is trying to be efficient, which is with as much aerial traffic as they have and how many moving parts and pieces they have to do to make everything, the sequencing work, everybody has become too used to clearing helicopters to fly under or behind these civilian commercial airliners that are on short final. That is so dangerous. That is a risk that does not need to be taken, just as we saw last night.
Yes.
Any of these circumstances can happen, and that has got to stop.
My impression is one of the reasons that occurs in this area is because the helicopter traffic, unlike, say, New York, is not commercial. Everything here is military or police officers, basically official government aircraft, really the only ones allowed to be in this area doing that. And they have a rapport with these air traffic controllers. And that kind of gets to the point I think that you're making, Amber Smith, which is it's gotten so lax that something this horrific could occur last night.
Yes, it is. It has gotten way too loose. It has gotten way too common that they're allowed to do that. Because guess what? When everything's fine, it works great, and you get to your destination 30 seconds sooner than you would have.
Yeah.
But guess what? When not everything is lined up perfectly,
yes,
look at what happened.
Amber Smith, they're telling us there was a crew of 3 on that Blackhawk last night, and I'm interested if you could help us understand kind of the roles of the people who were on that helicopter. But one thing I've heard is that when the weather is better and not quite as cold, the doors on the aircraft can be open, and that can help with visibility to kind of get an assessment around you of what's happening. But that last night was so cold that the doors would have been closed, and that would have constricted visibility to an extent. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, so you have 2 pilots. One's the pilot in command, one's the co-pilot. You have a crew chief. As I heard, there was only one on board tonight. Sometimes they have 2, depending upon the mission. But the crew chief's job is also to, clear the aircraft in the back, also look for traffic, among many, many other things. I will say that flying with doors on versus flying without doors on is a problem visually, not necessarily out the windscreen, but when it comes to a helicopter, you have this sort of like panoramic view, and you need all of it. And then and that's the view you have with the doors off. When you put the doors on, they're that dark green. Well, these helicopters were different, but you just have a little window, and it does obscure your vision a little bit. I remember flying my own aircraft. When you have the doors off, you can just see so much better. You can fly better. When you put the doors on, you're a little bit more restricted. But I honestly think these pilots were used to flying with doors on because they had, I think they at least sometimes did this VIP mission. And so I would think that they were very accustomed to flying with doors on. I don't know that for sure, but that's just my assessment from, knowing the field. So yeah, it obscures your vision a little bit. But I don't know. I bet they were probably used to it.
Yeah, probably so. Amber Smith, I'm really appreciative of your expertise and your time today. Thank you for that. Army helicopter pilot, former senior Pentagon official. Really appreciate you joining us here. All right, to the phones we go. That's where we find Alan calling in from North Carolina, line 8. Alan, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. I love your show, and I just wanted to let you know I flew out of National as an airline pilot. It's been a while, but I know what a pressure cooker it is in there, and that was 20 years ago. And now it's crazy. They are doing check rides in the helicopter, as I understand it. And I don't know that for a fact, but what I understand is they could have been using those night vision goggles.
Yes.
And using airliners as part of the check ride.
What is a check ride,
to make sure
Alan?
They can see them, perhaps. Just wanted to pass that along.
Hey, Alan, what is that? I'm sorry, what does that mean? What is a check ride?
Oh, a test. Everybody, all pilots have to undergo at least annual tests. And so, yeah, they go with an instructor pilot.
Oh, I see.
Which also means that's a very experienced pilot that's in the helicopter with them.
I see.
But I don't know. It got my attention when you started talking about all that.
Got it. All right. Well, Alan, thank you for that and for that perspective. A lot of great pilots in the audience. Appreciate all of you really helping us understand what happened last night. And we'll dive even deeper into all of this coming up. We've got Hung Cao joining us, retired Navy captain, former U.S. Senate candidate. He's going to talk about the salvage effort. He's been involved in recovering after these aircraft crashes. He'll talk to us about what the recovery effort is right now, what these guys are all dealing with as they try to recover the fallen. A tough story. Hung Cao joins us next to discuss.